everybody, and welcome to Let's Talk. My guest for this episode is my friend and colleague, Michelle Magida. Michelle is a licensed therapist, the owner of the counseling practice, therapy, etc., and a specialist in treating children. She has extensive experience as a special education teacher prior to beginning her career as a therapist and business owner, and is in the process of earning a doctorate in counseling, education, and supervision as well. So, Michelle, thank you so much for joining me for a conversation today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Absolutely. Well, so before we dive into our main topic for today, which is mental health with kids and teenagers and what parents can do, I want to first start with what makes you passionate about this topic to the point where you've opened up a business with that as the center. So you were a special education teacher before you became a therapist. Mm-hmm. What drove your passion there, and why did you make the pivot into therapy?
That is a great question, and one that I get asked a lot because it is a career change. The short answer is experience and happenstance brought me to this point of my professional journey. But the honest answer is I always wanted to be a teacher. Like, when all my other friends were playing house, I was busy playing school. But the truth was that school, academically, was very hard for me. And in hindsight, I believe I struggled with undiagnosed learning disabilities in both reading and math. And then in 6th grade, I had this horrible math teacher that said, "If you don't like the way I teach, then grow up, become a teacher, and do it yourself." And I said, okay. That was my ISU admissions essay, by the way. And by high school, I knew that I wanted to go into special education to support struggling students from falling through the cracks. Because I was just determined and disciplined enough that, something that would take someone 20 minutes would take me 2 hours, but I'd do it. Mm-hmm. I went to ISU for undergrad, and specifically for their SPED program, and it was so fantastic because it really prepared us to understand the job and how to do it well. But then you get to school, in the school setting, you become a teacher, you graduate, and you're like, okay, so reality isn't the same as paper? Because in addition to providing, education, there are 2 other really important parts to being a special education teacher that aren't talked about. So yeah, teachers have to individualize instruction to meet each child's unique needs while ensuring adherence to state learning standards. But they also, let me back up for a sec. So each student that receives special education services has what's known as an individualized education plan, or an IEP. This legal document, it details the child's education plan, including what accommodations or modifications they need to meet their unique needs so that they can function at the same level as their same-aged peers. It includes individualized goals, a description of how these goals are going to be measured, and for every service that the child receives. So as the special education teacher, I wasn't just the teacher, I was the case manager. Meaning, when a child receives additional related services, the maintenance and implementation of that goal, outside of the direct service minutes, was my responsibility. But there is this really weird, unspoken hierarchy that happens in a school setting, and I can tell you it happens in both public and private sectors, that drives a wedge between classroom staff, paraeducators, and special education teachers, and related services and administration. And I was so frustrated with that lack of collaboration and accountability. Yeah. And lastly, we're supervisors to all of the classroom staff, all of the paraeducators that are assigned to children that need maximum support, and providing that one-on-one help. We have to train them. We have to teach them how to implement the goals. We have to make sure that they're doing it correctly, because an IEP is a legal document.
Mm-hmm.
So I loved
you've got
it.
a lot of different hats on, it sounds like.
Yeah, so I loved it when the door was closed and I got to teach.
Yeah.
But it started getting harder and harder, and I was at Easter Seals in Waukegan. They literally closed their doors for financial reasons. And I said, okay, I'll go back to school so that I can hopefully bridge this gap.
Mm-hmm.
But if you would have told me 10 years ago that not only would I be working in private practice, but owning my own clinic, oh my God.
Yeah.
I would have laughed.
Well, that's a huge jump. And, you know, the thing about being a therapist, I know, like, my personal story about, like, why did I choose to become a psychologist? It was this really cliche aspect of when I was a kid where, like, I was always the friend who people told their problems to. And I was like, I'd be great at this. And then I liked AP Psych. Then, you know, I got to grad school, undergrad and grad school, and learned that actually there's a big difference between people just, like, telling you your problems as a friend and being a therapist. But aside from actually the therapy side, there is so much paperwork, and no one tells you that either. So you never entirely get away from it, from the documentation and the administrivia.
And laws. And ethics.
And laws.
And best practice.
Yeah, you know, the things that give our field integrity, you know, the little stuff like that. Still worth having, probably still worth having. But, you know, guardrails are important. But thank you for sharing your origin story and what brought you here. And so let's pivot, because I know that I feel kind of like a latecomer to the youth mental health party. I've gotten a lot more involved in it, I'd say, over the past 5 years, but it wasn't something that I focused on earlier on. What brought me there, though, was the fact that just personally, in my own professional journey, I started seeing more and more young people having problems. And as you know, I sit in the addiction world. And so this was definitely coming across my purview. One of the things about addiction, though, is it ultimately is a coping strategy for mental health. And I was looking around. Not a healthy one. Right. Yeah, not a healthy one, an unsustainable one. But I was looking around, and part of the reason why I reached out to you about doing this show was that I was looking around, and within the past 3 months, both the Surgeon General and a combination of the American Academy of Pediatrics, Children's Hospital Association, and American the Child Psychiatry Association as well, I'm forgetting their full name, they've both released these joint statements about how there is a mental health emergency going on right now with young people. And I would love to get your perspective on, do you agree, do you disagree? And if you do agree, what do you see going on, and what's up right now with kids and their mental health?
I love that the spotlight has been pivoting more towards the need for awareness and access to services for younger individuals, because I might be a bit biased, but I'm all about early intervention. And so opening therapy, etc., gave me the privilege of marrying my love of teaching with my love of counseling in a way that I never really imagined. From helping children and parents to families and supporting schools. But when COVID hit, science was faced with a really difficult decision of enforcing social isolation in an effort to preserve life. Understandably so. But humans aren't meant to live under the constant threat of risk. The human body, it just wasn't designed to manage such an abundance of stress hormones for such a long period of time. Mm-hmm. Okay, this has been going on for almost 2 years now.
I know.
So,
it's amazing.
And that in and of itself has caused significant disturbances in a variety of ways, all of which impact social and emotional functioning, but really, especially for children. Because biologically speaking, humans are mammals. We are designed to live in packs for social connection and for survival, because one person wasn't created spiritually or scientifically to do it all. Mm-hmm. So when unrealistic and unreasonable expectations are placed on us, we break. And I'm reminded of a quote by Albert Einstein: everybody is a genius, but if we judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing that it's stupid. And children and parents feel like they're failing, and that's not a comfortable place to live, with the lack of connection, the severe isolation. I mean, think of the psychosis that it can bring on solitary confinement prisoners. It's used as punishment.
Mm-hmm. And I imagine, like, particularly in the formative years, it's even more disruptive than for the adults who are going through this.
0 to 7.
Mm-hmm.
When we say formative years, just to operationalize it for your viewers and listeners, when we say formative years, 0 to 5 is very important, yes. But the brain malleability and neuroplasticity is still pretty flexible until the age of 7, which is why they say, if you want to learn another language, do it before 7.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally missed that boat. I didn't start French till junior high. That's probably why it was so hard, in retrospect.
Absolutely.
But it really does shine a light on the fact that the kids who are in that range right now, whose activities might be restricted, or even who are learning about their world through this really oddly colored lens of social distancing and masking and wondering if somebody's sick, if they're not. I mean, it creates this extra layer of questioning and a lack of safety and security that I could only imagine as being internalized and then generalized in ways that are really counterproductive to long-term functioning.
Absolutely. We live and die for community. While online platforms are awesome supplements, they're not adequate replacements for human contact and connection. And so when parents are doing it all and alone, in addition to the reduction in access to school and community-related resources, it's devastating. Also, parents are spending more time with their kids and noticing, oh, that's what the school's been talking about. Oh, hang on, I thought he was going to grow out of this. Oh, that's still a problem for her. We should probably call someone. So in addition to individual therapy that can look like parent coaching, family therapy, educational consultation, or even medication management.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, and at the end of the show, I do want to talk a bit about if people need help for their kids, what should they think about? Who should they reach out to? Because I know there's some barriers there. But before we get there, talking more about your philosophy in terms of mental wellness with kids. You have a phrase that you like to use, that you say that kids are always scanning for connection or protection. How do you define that? Why are they so important? Can you tell us a little bit about what you mean by that?
Yeah. So actually, I got to give credit where it's due. The scanning for connection or protection comes from Deb Dana and her work in polyvagal theory, but mirrors Daniel Siegel and positive parenting and a 4-week parenting course that I created called Connection Before Correction. But I geek out over understanding why people make the choices that they do. And ultimately, I believe that all behavior is communication. The human body has this super intricate built-in security system called the autonomic nervous system. And it's constantly and continuously scanning the environment for risks of living. So what is connection? It means feeling emotionally and physically safe enough to socially engage. What's protection? It means that your body's security system is saying there is a perceived threat. We need to start doing something where there's a real threat. We're not safe. We're probably going to shut down.
Mm-hmm. Like fight or flight.
So, there's actually baseline, we're okay, fight or flight, and then there's freeze.
Yeah. Yeah, but these protective mechanisms, I know I like to explain it as that our bodies perceive all threats as being physical threats. Like, it only knows one way to respond. It doesn't matter if it's like a threat to your social life, or a threat to your financial life, which I know, 5-year-olds aren't thinking about. But any other sort of threat, your body just is responding as if it needs to hit hard or run fast. And that's where the stress responses come from.
Yes. So one thing that I think is really cool, again, because I'm a geek, is that our brain develops from back to front and then regresses from front to back. So this very, very front part, back part right here is the amygdala, which is responsible for our fight, flight, or freeze responses. But when this turns on, this turns off. And this gives us planning, prioritization, task initiation, flexibility, thinking about long-term consequences, problem-solving, language.
Mm-hmm.
And so when this is on and you're saying, why aren't you talking to me?
Yeah.
Because it's shut off.
Right. Well, there's this fixation. That's another part of the anxiety process in particular, this fixation on whatever you perceive the threat to be, to the exclusion of other things, like, say, parents, perhaps. So how do you see the intersection then between what's going on with this marathon of stress that kids are running through right now and this idea of connection or protection?
So first of all, they physically are unable to have the same connection experiences that were previously available. And secondly, they're in constant protection mode because you literally have to put on a mask and walk around with an immunization card to go outside. And I personally don't have a problem with that. I just got my booster yesterday. I'm just saying that that's not how and where humans are supposed to live. And when children don't feel safe, it can look like a lot of things. Right.
Well, so how would you, this leads to another, I think, important question of, from the parent point of view, what should you be looking for as signs that maybe your child is dysregulated in this way when because I'd imagine, being a parent myself, mine are 7 and 5, that, there's a certain amount of rebelliousness that you can expect, or identity formation and pushing back and acting out. We'll call it like the normal range of how kids would act. Where should parents draw the line? How do you distinguish that?
That's a very good question, and knowing that it's okay to ask for help is great, but knowing when to ask for help isn't as clear. So I'm going to back up a little bit. First, I'm going to say what some signs and symptoms of dysregulation in children might look like. At that mobilization stage where they have a perceived threat, it can look like anxiety, panic attacks, anger, inability to focus or follow through, distress in relationships. And think about those symptoms. Don't they sound like a lot of other things that could be misdiagnosed?
Absolutely.
So I'll get back to that in a second. And at the immobilization stage, when there's real threat, or they believe that there's a real threat, it can look like depression, despair, hopelessness, fogginess, and isolation. And this is the most, what therapy, etc., the most important work that we do is guiding and coaching parents to enjoy their children, and for children to learn how to enjoy being kids. Mm-hmm. Because no one human is designed to do anything all alone, especially parenting. It's like the hardest job that doesn't come with a manual or a handbook.
Right. Well, so like, let me give you a scenario, because I would love to get your thoughts on this. Like, say you've got a child who is struggling with some amount of school anxiety, and not necessarily even like the COVID type, just like the traditional type. Maybe there's pressure put on them and competitive school, or just they're feeling a lot of pressure. That's not necessarily an atypical experience. How would you draw the line then between someone who's just going through, we'll call it the normal stressors and adaptations to learning how to cope with life, and a child maybe who's hit that point where they're looking for that protection and they're falling into themselves or acting out? Like, where do you draw that line?
That's a really great question. And the answer is in the way that they respond to and deal with the negative situation or the negative feelings. It's completely okay to experience negative emotions. As a matter of fact, negative emotions are really important. I say for 2 reasons. Can you want to venture a guess why negative emotions are important?
I'll put me on the spot. All right.
Yeah.
First guess is because they're telling you that something is wrong. It's sending you a signal.
Yes! That is totally one of them. Absolutely. It's letting you know you are in a state of distress. Mental, emotional, physical, Yes. And the other reason is it allows you to appreciate the good. You can't have good without knowing what bad feels like. Mm-hmm. So I tell even my own children who are 7 and 4, it's not realistic to expect to never be angry again. You're allowed to be mad. You can't be mean. You can't be mean to others, and you can't be mean to yourself. Mm-hmm. As a parent, I found that I usually call my pediatrician when I had used all the tools in my toolbox and my child's symptoms haven't improved or their symptoms have gotten worse. I call my pediatrician when I'm worried. I call when I think my child might need medication. It takes a lot of courage to ask for help. And the truth is, parents don't have to handle or struggle alone. So if you being a parent are at a point where you're wondering, should I ask for help? Do it. Ask for help. Like, it's not a contract. You're not signing up. You're not it's not gonna be on your permanent record. Like, just get help.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, for sure. And I think there's this stigma to a certain point of like it's a reflection on me as a parent if I need to reach out for help. Like I should be able, I think that's the judgment.
There you go, shooting on yourself.
I know. We need to make a t-shirt. Do you have a t-shirt? Does Therapy Center have a t-shirt that says don't shit on yourself?
No, but it should.
There it is. So for listeners, this is shoulding, SHOULD, on yourself. Should is a very counterproductive word, and we're having a little bit of therapist humor.
The other thing, actually, kind of on the same page. So, thinking and viewing your success, your productivity, as shoulds. I should be able to do this. I should be able to do that. I should. That's what we call a cognitive distortion. It is an unhealthy way of processing our thoughts and our feelings. And that happens a lot because parents think that kids should be able to do certain things, but they forget that they shouldn't because they're children. And so we need to make sure that our expectations are both realistic and reasonable.
Mm-hmm. Right. Their brains, as you mentioned, developing back to front. And I think the end point where you're at, we'll call it like maximum development with the least amount of degradation is like somewhere in the 25-year-old vicinity. So, they got a little ways to go with cognitive development and moral development.
So between 23 and 25 for females and between 25 and 27 for males.
Right. I need every year of, before my break. Like, I'm glad I peaked a little bit later. It gives me an extra, but anyway. So what I'm thinking about when we're talking about this too, this idea of when are things a problem is that trajectory matters. And if you're looking at your child and you're saying, wow, so they are really struggling with school, or they're really struggling to manage their emotions or their anxiety or whatever it is, and it's getting worse rather than getting better, or you're trying things that theoretically you think should help, and it's not getting better, and it's really affecting your child's ability to enjoy their life or to do what they want to do, whether or not it's like sports or school or whatever, like that's an invitation to reach out to someone who's had some professional training and have them give it a go, because those interventions might have some luck where yours might not have worked because you're not a trained mental health professional.
Yes. Sometimes we can see things that parents can't because we're trained, and sometimes just because we're a third party. Mm-hmm. We're not in it. When it comes to knowing when to ask for help, I always tell parents to trust their gut. And also reach out when it doesn't make sense. Like, they just seem really off or really sad, but they have tons of friends, and they're on this team and this club, and they're so social and all this stuff, but whenever they're home, they're isolative and very gloomy. And it just doesn't make sense. That would be another time to reach out.
Mm-hmm. Like if it's like when they take their wall down, what's behind the wall is very different than what they're showing the rest of the world.
Right. Mm-hmm. The other question we get asked a lot is, what is parent coaching? And how is it different from therapy? Parent coaching is guiding, teaching, and supporting parents through their parenting journey. We teach tools. So let's say you come in and you're like, I've tried everything. I've tried 1, 2, 3 magic, and I've tried timeouts, and I've tried time ins, and I've tried sticker charts, and I've tried everything. And I'll say, I believe you. Tell me how you did it. Because maybe they're doing the idea, but they're not actually implementing the tool correctly.
Yeah.
And so with parent coaching,
hammering with a wrench.
Yes. Exactly.
Yeah. Sorry, please continue.
No, that's what I was kind of laughing because the analogy I always use is a screwdriver. Like we have Phillips, we have flathead, we have lots of different sizes.
Yeah.
They all have the same job. But you need to have the right one. And so our job is to know all the different options. And then the family's job is to practice and try the tools out. Mm-hmm. They can come back and say, I tried 17 of these 20 suggestions over the last couple of months, and none of them worked, but these 3 did. Cool. All you need is one.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I really like the distinction between there's the tools and then there's using them correctly. I know one of the most stark examples of this that I can remember just from my own education was I was on my pre-doctoral internship. I was in my 20s when I actually learned how to use a stress ball. You know, those like squishy things that you have. You squish them and you're like, what's the point? Like I would always pick them up and be like, I really don't feel any better. Like my fingers are a little bit sore. Like how is this de-stressing me? And then someone told me, one of my advisors on internship, they said, no, you're supposed to use this with diaphragmatic breathing exercises, and you squeeze on the inhale and you release on the exhale. And I was like, really? And I tried it, and it was amazing. And it was just that simple little pivot. It makes all the difference. But if you don't know how to use the tool, just having the tool itself doesn't necessarily help you.
Exactly. Yeah. Here's a really common one that I see with parents of younger children, like from toddler through primary elementary school, who try to use a timeout method. Timeouts are awesome when there's a lot of stimulus going on, there's a lot of feelings going on, and the child needs a moment to just decompress. Timeouts are meant to be an opportunity for the child to regain themselves. It's not meant to be punitive. It's meant to be taught as a tool. So, you are doing something unsafe. And unsafe choices either hurt people's bodies or hurt people's feelings. Okay? Mm-hmm. So we gotta make safe choices. You are doing something unsafe, that's one. Usually, parents often just move on. Warning, 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 out. Mm-hmm. We're missing the teaching part. We frequently, as adults, tell children what not to do, and we miss the most important opportunity to tell them what to do. So, don't stand at the top of the slide. Okay, it's kind of telling them what to do, but it's not explaining. When you stand at the top of the slide, or when you walk up the slide, I'm worried you're going to fall off the side and hurt your head. Oh, there's a reason to it. You're not just nagging me, right? So, 2, we don't throw things. We only throw balls. We don't throw toys, we only throw balls. And then 3, you need to have nice hands. You're not making safe choices. So, and this process has already been explained to the child. So now we're going to go and we're going to have a moment to just breathe and think and consider. And it's not pretty. I've been there. It's not a pretty process.
Yeah.
But the point is this. First, tell them what the mistake was and how to correct it in the future. And lastly, at the end of the timeout, there has to be repair. Ruptures in relationships happen without repair that causes disconnect. And then when children get their primary attention from misbehaviors, they might internalize it as, oh, so when I do bad stuff, they actually pay attention to me? And negative attention is better than no attention at all. Mm-hmm. So right. They don't know what to do, but they know, to not get you mad, but they know what to do to get your attention.
Right. So it's actually, it's meeting a need, it's, even if it feels like from the parent point of view, like, why would they be doing this? Well, there is a logical answer, and it's that it's actually meeting a need, even if it's not in the healthiest or best way.
Just like with substance use.
Absolutely. Well, so let's use this as a bridge to my next question. And it has to do with, you said a second ago that there's a lot of parents who go like the warning, gone sort of approach. And we've talked about this idea that connection is very important, and that feeling like they don't need to protect themselves because they're emotionally safe is important. And so from the parent point of view, what can parents do to communicate to their child, you are emotionally safe here? I'm not someone you have to worry about. You don't need protection from me.
Yeah. Great question. So if connection is key to fostering a sense of emotional safety, how do I do it? The answer might seem deceptively easy. But the truth is that the best way for parents to better connect with their child is to spend time with them. Show them that you care. Take the time to listen. Spend 30 uninterrupted minutes with your kid each day. If you can't, go for once a week. Just to be together. Play. I don't care if your kid's 4 or 14 or 44. Your kid still wants to play with you. Be silly. Laugh. Hug. Lastly, be consistent. I jokingly say consistency beats accuracy 100% of the time. But, so remember when I said expectations need to be reasonable and realistic?
Mm-hmm.
Well, kids also need to know what to expect and what's expected of them. And so if those expectations are consistent, it feels safe. If you're a person I can laugh with, I can be safe. If you're a person I can go to and you hear me, I can be safe.
Mm-hmm.
That's really hard to do. As a parent, it can be really hard to do. And have you ever seen that visual of an iceberg where most of it is, 90% of it's actually under the water?
Mm-hmm.
Well, the 10% is what we see. It's the actual behaviors that the kids are engaging in. The whining, the eye rolling, the yelling, the throwing, the complaining, the negotiating. I mean, I can go on and on.
Mm-hmm.
But you hit the nail on the head. There's a need that hasn't been met. And I know that when one of my munchkins is saying, but I really wanted the yellow cup, it's because she's legit upset that she didn't articulate herself quickly enough to let me know that she really wanted the yellow cup. And even though I don't love the way in which she communicated with me, I need to be mindful of the fact that she's 4, and she said, but I wanted the yellow cup. So as a parent, I need to learn how to choose my battles.
Mm-hmm.
And listen to the message and then teach later. Hey,
Right.
Maya, I noticed earlier you were really upset when I gave you an orange cup instead of a yellow cup. What's another way that you can ask for the cup that you want without hurting mommy's ears?
Mm-hmm.
Problem solving, teaching, considering, and always end with a hug and I love you.
Yeah, that repair part, right?
Yes.
I think that, when we talk about attachment theories, which we don't have to go all the way down that rabbit hole today, but a lot of that comes from the idea that your secure person will come back to you. And that can be both, from the physical standpoint as well as the emotional one.
Yes, actually. So remember I mentioned polyvagal theory and the autonomic nervous system?
Mm-hmm.
It all goes back to attachment. So neurologically, we encode. You ever heard that quote, people might not remember what you said, but they'll remember how you made them feel?
Mm-hmm.
That's what happens. And so a situation will happen that results in a visceral response, positive, negative, whatever, and boom, seed is planted. The next time your body experiences something that elicits the same visceral response, you grow a branch. And it continues growing. We can have negative encoded messages and we can have positive encoded messages. And the sooner that we can address the way in which messages are being received and perceived, the less work for later.
Well, and from what you just said, I love that you're highlighting that the most important part is how the message is perceived or received, because I think a lot of times people focus on their intention, how you intend for it to be received. And this goes for adults as well, of course. This is like the heart of a lot of couples therapy. But is that just because you think that something's coming across in a certain way doesn't necessarily mean that that's how your child is receiving it. And the same thing actually from the other way around, right? That complaint about the color of the cup, she probably wasn't thinking that it was hurting your ears or being inconsiderate or rude or anything like that. She was just having a feeling and expressing it in a way that felt natural in the moment without necessarily the knowledge of, so I've got this urge to express myself. How do I act that out in a productive way? And that's on us as parents to teach our kids how to do that.
It's also on us as parents to recognize that, to be aware of that, and to know how to separate the two. Because if we're nagging constantly and the feedback that they predominantly get from us is negative, then not only are they going to interpret a negative internal message about themselves, but that's how they're going to start treating and talking to other people.
Mm-hmm. Well, so last question before we wrap things up for the day. So we talked a little bit before about the idea that parents will oftentimes hold back from reaching out for help because they feel like there's this stigma attached, which we've already talked about really shouldn't be there. There's reasons why folks like you and I go to school for a really long time to learn how to help with these things. They're things that most of us just don't pick up growing up. I know certainly I didn't. I learned a lot from my time in training. But when it comes to actually what happens to a child when they engage in this process, what can a parent expect? Is it always just a therapist? Are there programs out there? Like what should parents be aware of just to demystify and maybe defang the idea of going for therapy a little bit?
Yeah. It is still so taboo. Behavioral health and medical health are still two very different things, which shouldn't be the case, because why is it okay to treat the pancreas, diabetes, but it's not okay to treat one of the largest organs of our body, the brain? Why is it okay to treat the heart and teeth? And why is it okay to go to a podiatrist, but it's not okay to take care of your mental and emotional health? And a lot of it's taboo still, unfortunately, and we're trying to end that stigma. When prospective clients call our intake line, they will be able to calmly and at their pace get the answers that they need regarding payment and process and stuff like that. So, additionally, if somebody calls our intake line and we are not in network with them, we will help them find a referral. Or, we have a lot of sliding scale options. And our goal is to make mental health care accessible for all. Other places, it's by insurance. You pay your copay at the beginning of the year. Oftentimes you're responsible for your deductible. It's usually once a week. But the way it looks, again, we shouldn't should ourselves into a corner. I always meet with the parents individually first. Then I meet with the child individually, and then we go from there. No two people are alike, so no two treatment plans should be alike. So if, you think of some sort of configuration and we've done it, 15, 45, 30, 30, child comes in we've had child comes in weekly for individual therapy, child comes in with siblings weekly for family therapy, and parents come in weekly for parent coaching. I mean, we can customize programs to meet each individual child and family's need.
So really what you're saying, though, is that the family is a critical element. It's not just about the child. You need to be engaged with the parents, and so the parents then also would need to be engaged. Maybe even the siblings. The child doesn't exist I guess coming full circle, the child does not exist in isolation. They're part of a system, they're part of a community, and particularly with the family community, that's something where there might be dynamics there that need to be adjusted, where it's not just all on the child to change.
Yes, because it wasn't all on the child to get to this point. And let's say the child's 12, and we have 12 years of habits. Let's be realistic and reasonable about how long it's going to take us to recognize, unlearn, and relearn habits.
Mm-hmm.
Because otherwise you're all going to be disappointed in each other, and you're also going to be disappointed in your therapist.
Yeah, realistic expectations going in. That's something I know that I talk with a lot of folks about as well when they're coming in potentially looking for therapy, is that we can make a lot of progress, but it's probably going to take between 2 and 6 months to get where we want to go. You know what I mean? This isn't the sort of overnight fix sort of deal here.
Also, so 2 things. I always tell my clients, parents, children, you get out of this experience what you put into it. Mm-hmm. And your therapist isn't here to fix a problem. We're here to support you as you navigate through untangling and rebuilding yourself and your system. We're crutches. We're not magicians.
Yeah. Yeah, the word I use for that idea is that it always comes out a little bit weird, but I am a tool. I'm
a screwdriver.
Yes, I'm a screwdriver. There we go. I am a hammer. I'm something for you to use to reach your goals that you might not be able to reach without said tool. But
I'm a scaffold.
Oh, that's a lot more elegant. I like that.
Yeah.
Scaffold.
I share tools with them to use, and my goal is to not be needed.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Horrible good business model.
I know, right? Good therapists, we put ourselves out of a job.
I tell my clients all the time, even in the intake session, what does better look like for you? How will you know once you're at a space and a place that you're satisfied with? Because my goal is to not be needed.
Right. And I think that represents a shift, I think, between the old guard and the new guard in therapy, where in the past it's always been you're picking a therapist is like picking a partner for life or something, where you're never going to stop. But that's not actually how therapy should work these days. Ideally, things get better, and then at the very least you're not needing weekly work.
There's also different therapists for different areas of need and for different phases of life. Personally, I think I've been in therapy since I was 16 years old. And if I was with the same therapist I was with when I was 16, I don't know that I would have been able to do as much growth. Yeah,
no, that's a really fair point too. We're angled in certain directions, and it's a good idea to not try to say that you're truly a jack of all trades, because we're not. We're trained to handle very specific things. Well, not all right. I don't want to sell us too short. Maybe not that specific. We've got some generalized skills, but you can only go so deep if you're trying to have your hand in everything.
Absolutely. I mean, even in the medical community, we have general surgeons, general doctors, we have internists, but then we have specialists, right? So it's not that someone like me or someone like you can't treat, dare I say, a run-of-the-mill anxiety or depression case, but with significant addiction, that's out of my wheelhouse, and I would gladly refer them to you. Similarly, when I say we see children, we support children as young as 3 years old. So as soon as they graduate early intervention and parents feel that they could benefit from ongoing outpatient support, they can come to us. Whereas many of the other practices in the area will say they work with children, but really it's under 12 or under 8, or 8 and up, or 12 and up, or first grade and up. We do preschool.
Yeah, well, that definitely is something that sets you guys apart, and it's so hard, I think, particularly when you get to the really low end of the age spectrum, to find folks who feel legitimately comfortable doing that, just because because of that developmental curve, things look different at every age.
That is so true, and I think that the scariest word for parents is normal. What the heck is normal?
Yeah. I'll end with an anecdote about just not knowing what normal is. When I was earlier on in my parenting journey, but embarrassingly late, it was when I was studying for the psychology licensure exam, the EPPP, and there's a question about developmental psychology, and it was something along the lines of, your child is 1 year old, and they understand you when you talk to them, but they can't talk back. What do you do? And I picked the one that was have them evaluated for autism instead of this is totally normal. And I was oh no. It's no one was there, right? No one would even know what happened if I didn't share. It was one of those humbling moments where it's I knew so very little about what to expect when my daughter was just born and when she was young, that something even as basic as that, and I'm a psychologist, so, we all have learning curves.
We sure do.
Well, Michelle, thank you so much for joining me for a conversation today. Is there anything that you'd like to leave the audience with, a last thought before we close things up?
I would have to say that parenting isn't easy, and it's the hardest and most rewarding job in the world.
Yeah.
And I wish parents gave themselves more credit. I wish children gave themselves more credit. I wish humankind during a global pandemic that's lasted over almost 2 years would give themselves credit. And just, we always talk about being kind to others, and I'd really like us to leave off on the note of remembering how important it is to be kind to ourselves.
Well, that is a wonderful note to end on, because it's true. Everything you said is 100% accurate. This is an unprecedented time, and parents are part of the family too. I think we can kind of get ourselves into self-sacrifice mode a lot, but our health affects our kids too. So thank you for that.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you again, Michelle, for coming on the show. Thanks to everyone who took the time to watch or listen in. Appreciate it as always, and take care out there, and we'll catch you guys next time.
Stay warm.
Yes, stay warm.